Welcome to my channel. This is I Read This Book with Chris, and it's with me, Chris. Today we'll be discussing Pastimes by Poul Anderson. I'll be drinking an old-fashioned. In my most recent book haul video, let's see, Cameron Moses's art. I don't know if it's Cameron Moses art or Cameron Moses's art. Suggests that I read this one because of the dinosaur. The really poorly drawn dinosaur with the guy. That cover art got Cameron to say, read this. So I read it, and let me tell you, this is not a book. This is a short story anthology. Which I cannot, even after realizing that it is a short story anthology, it takes me going to the copyright page and seeing all the different stories with their copyright year in order to realize that it is actually a short story anthology. Table of contents, I figured, were just chapter titles, and I read all the way through the first short story, and I was very confused why it ended and what was going on with the second story. It took me a little bit to realize that it actually is a short story anthology. To people who are publishing books in the 1980s, if you could please just write stories or a collection or something on the front or the back or anywhere in the book to let people know this is a collection of short stories. Alrighty. So, it's a collection of short stories, basically all about time travel. One is about multiple universes, so traveling to different universes, which is kind of like time travel. They're interesting. The first story is the story that has dinosaurs, where people are sent back in time to collect oil, which is then transported to the future in order for America to have enough oil, which is strange, and they talk about the strangeness of it, only to realize that the future is actually going to get, there's going to be a nuclear war in the future, and this time, a little bit in the past, is actually going to be, hopefully, the salvation of mankind. There's another story where there is a Boy Scout who accidentally travels back in time for 30 hours and has a little adventure. And there is the story that is actually the one that is not about time travel, that is about going to parallel universes. I would actually like to discuss the afterword of the short story. And most short stories I know don't have afterwords. I've read prefaces to short story collections and afterwords to short story collections. I have a Robert Silverberg collection where before every story, there's like a little introduction. Some of them are like a paragraph, some of them are like a page and a half, explaining what was going on when he made that story. It includes his first ever published short story, and just a bunch of ones that I believe weren't published. So that makes sense. But an afterword for a short story is a little different. It's just about 2 pages, so I'm going to read it to you. Hopefully, whoever holds the copyright will not be upset. But you might find it interesting, especially considering the times we're in. So this is copyright 1984. The story has a copyright of 1967. Is this one actually by? This might actually not be by. Are all these by Poul Anderson? Utopia by Poul Anderson. Okay, so I guess these are all by him. I was just looking up the copyright. Back to it. The afterword. So I don't know whether or not this was written in 1967 or in 1984 or sometime in between. Readers ought to know that writers are not responsible for the opinions and behavior of their characters. But many people don't. In consequence, I, for instance, have been called a fascist to my face. Doubtless, the present story will get me accused of worse. And I only wanted to spin a yarn. Well, perhaps a bit more. That can't be helped. Everybody views the world from his particular philosophical platform. Hence, any writer who tries to report what he sees is inevitably. Hence, any writer who tries to report what he sees is inevitably propagandizing. But as a rule, the propaganda lies below the surface. This is twice true of science fiction, which begins by transmuting reality into frank unreality. So what have I been advocating here? Not any particular form of society. On the contrary, humankind seems to me so splendidly and ironically variable that there can be no perfect social order. I do suspect that few people are biologically adapted to civilization. Consider its repeated collapses. This idea could be wrong, of course. Even if true, it may be just another factor which our planning should take into account. But the mutability of man is hardly open to question. Thus, each arrangement he makes will have its flaws, which in the end will bring it to ruin. But each will also have its virtues. I myself don't think here and now is such a bad place to live, but others might. In fact, others do. At the same time, we cannot deny that some ways of life are, on balance, evil. The worst and most dangerous are those which cannot tolerate anything different from themselves. So in an age of conflict, we need a clear understanding of our own values and the enemy's. Likewise, we have to see with equal clarity the drawbacks of both cultures. This is less a moral than a strategic imperative. Only on such a basis can we know what we ought to do and what it is possible for us to do. For we are not caught in a meaningless nightmare. We are inhabiting a real world where events have understandable causes and the causes have effects. We were never given any sacred mission, and it would be fatal to believe otherwise. We do, though, have the right of self-preservation. Let us know what it is we want to preserve. Then common sense and old-fashioned guts will probably get us through. This is rather a heavy sermon to load on a story which was, after all, meant as entertainment. The point was made far better by Robinson Jeffers. Long live freedom, and damn the ideologies. In this short afterword, he goes and he makes quite a few points that I enjoy, while at the same time not going and trying to explain to you his story or his art. I really do not appreciate artists trying to explain the art, especially their own art. I like if you have to explain it, it's not actually art. Art should stand by itself, and different people will come to it and get different things, but it has the truth that you put into it, whatever that may be. And I think that's sort of what he's saying here. One is I don't control my story. I'm letting my story be what it is. I'm allowing the story that I thought up exist on its own, which I can appreciate. Just find it and you let the muse take over, basically. Whatever that means, I don't exactly know what that means, but obviously a lot of people have used a similar thing. And then he compares it to propaganda, which is trying to force your own views down on other people. And basically, the main point that he's making here, after saying, hey, this is just art, I'm not trying to propagandize you, is the worst thing you can do is be unable to exist in a world where other people don't agree with you. And this idea can obviously go wrong in a few ways. But he rejects those, saying, I'm not saying that every worldview, every culture is good. Some of them are pure evil. However, a lot of people have a different temperament, and because of their different temperament, it is okay for them to live differently. It kind of floats into the idea of federalism, the whole idea of America, which is we are big, we are spread out, and instead of trying to have the federal government come down and control everything, we have a bunch of different states, and states will have different rules and laws and regulations and different cultures, and that's okay. And in the states, there'll be different cities where certain things are allowed and other things aren't allowed, and that's okay, because if you don't like it, it's fine. There's another place that'll fit you better, maybe. Very interesting political and artistic essay, basically. Very short. And I enjoyed it. I haven't read, I think this is the first Poul Anderson I have read. I do have him. And he wrote a lot. So I'm interested now to pick up more of him. Hopefully he tries some other time travel concepts too. Several of the time travel stories had the idea of inertia. So when you're traveling in time, you can't travel back to yesterday. You can travel only 1,000,000 years back in time because there's inertia, which sort of then gets rid of a lot of the paradoxes. So there are several ideas based off the inertial concept. Another one that had it was that multiple universes, where you couldn't get to a universe right next to yours. You could get to a universe that was many universes away because of inertia, which is a great idea, which any of you science fiction writers should steal because it makes time travel probably a whole lot simpler. Here's a little bonus read for you guys. Danny Dunn and the Anti-Gravity Paint. So this is a story. It's a very quick read. I believe it's probably 3rd or 4th grade level. That's my wild guess. There's a series. I looked it up. It's a little expensive. It's not ridiculously expensive. This little boy, Danny Dunn, who his mother works for a professor, being like a house cleaner and cook and whatever. And so Danny becomes friends with this professor, and hijinks ensue. This one, the anti-gravity paint, they apply paint, and when the paint has electricity brought to it, it pushes it away from bodies of mass. So then it allows it to get into outer space, and then it has inertia, so then it keeps traveling. So they go to the moon, and then they use it to bounce off the moon. Not the moon, they go to Mars. It's crazy. It's silly. It's a very something. It's a good read, a quick read. Probably something that you might suggest to a child that likes this stuff. Good book. A lot of the kids' books that I read, I get disappointed in. One of my favorite series when I was growing up was The Boxcar Children, which was 4 kids that lived out of a boxcar, a train boxcar, and, had adventures. But I tried reading it, and it is so fast, so short sentences, so little happens, because it's meant for like 1st or 2nd graders. And I remember loving it, but it's not good. You can't get any joy out of it. This one, Danny Dunn, I thought was actually well written. So, thank you for watching. Pick up either of these, or don't. If you liked it, give it a like. If you have something to comment, make a comment. Otherwise, cheers.